So there was a pattern. Things weren't going well. So there's, usually some tragedy, at least for me, attached. And then you get on stage and you make fun of it. And the first joke I ever wrote, I still do on stage. And it says, my first husband got another girl pregnant while we were married. And I'm flexible, but I'm not that flexible.
This is Coop's Comedy Corner. Buckle up because it's funny as Coop's Comedy Corner.
Welcome to Coop's Comedy Corner. I'm your host, Steve Cooper. I'm going to tell you some good news. I'm the coordinator of Comedy Train Rek, which Comedy Train Rek is a great production facility in Philadelphia. They have John Kensel has a show, Coleman Green has a show, Ed McGonigal has a show. They have a lot of shows going on, a bunch of new shows coming up. But Jimmy went and he gave me a website called coopscomedycorner.com, and it's the home for all Coop merchandise. We have not only this show, we have my business podcast, The Coop Tank, and my original show, Cooper Talk. And there's T-shirts, and there's T-shirts for women, and there's T-shirts for dogs, and there's mugs. So go check that out, and please check out Comedy Train Rek and follow them. And I'm really excited to have my guest today. She did my show Cooper Talk. She's done it twice, and I know she reached out to me. I think, God, it must have been like 13 years ago when I was in LA, and she came on. And then I've been on her podcast, I think 2 or 3 times. She's like me. She's like a long hauler, man. She's been doing her show Storyworthy forever, and she has a great show she runs out of the Improv, I believe. I think it's still the Improv, and it's called Story Smash, and it's my friend Christine Blackburn. How you doing, Christine?
Hey, Steve. I'm always happy to see you.
The last time I saw you, you were a speaker at, I think it was Podfest, and it was in Philly, and you invited me to the after-hour party. Not after hour, it was 7 o'clock, but I'm older, so that's after hour for me. At the Reading Terminal. We met at the Reading Terminal, and we hung out, and it was really cool. And tell me how you got involved with what was it called? The big.
Oh, that was just podcast movement. It's just one of the many podcast conventions. And for a couple of years there, I did a bunch of them, but I don't do that so much anymore. But that was a fun night. And you're my Philly connection. So when I had an extra pass to go that night, these conventions will be like 5 days long. And each night, there'll be 4 nights of parties, and they'll be hosted by somebody different, like a different sponsor, and they'll pay for all the alcohol and everything. So that night, I knew that the event was being held in downtown Philadelphia. What do they call it? The what market?
The Reading Terminal. The
Reading Terminal. And everything was free. Wasn't it fun? That was a blast.
Well, it's always, hey, man, if it's free, it's for me. Now, you've been in LA. I got to ask you, because you act, you do a bunch of stuff. What is the state of the industry now? I heard people are not the city, because we're not going to talk about that, because I know it's a beautiful city, and I don't get into politics. And I mean, whatever. But the state of the industry, I've talked to people on the show that says, it's hard for an actor these days. And I know you've been in commercials. You did that commercial where you played the hairdresser. I remember seeing you. It was, but what's it like for being an actor right now?
Well, I guess it depends. I mean, there's always been, the stars, as it were, who get to act, and they seem to never stop working. I mean, Nicole Kidman has a new movie out every 3 weeks. So I think it depends on for who. I mean, it's always been hard as a working actor. That hasn't changed. And so in some ways, it might be hard because there's production everywhere around the world now. But then the other thing that, that is different is that there's a lot more opportunity as well. There's a lot more projects, obviously, since people can just make a movie and put it on YouTube. So, there's all sorts of jobs to get. But as of making a living as an actor, that was never feasible anyway.
So I have to ask you, we're connected on LinkedIn, and I always see your Storyworthy podcast. First of all, tell us about the Storyworthy podcast and some of the guests. I mean, she had Sugar Ray Leonard, she had Richard Marx, which I'm still pissed. I got turned down for Richard Marx. But tell us about Storyworthy. Then I want to go from there. But tell us about your podcast, when you started it, and it's evolved. I mean, you really have evolved over the years.
Yeah. Somebody's knocking at my door. Isn't that strange?
Who is it? Is it Richard Marx?
I doubt it. Let me go check. Do you mind? Nobody ever knocks at my door, Steve. Okay, hold on. And I'm back. Oh, hi. Oh, it's so nice to see you.
So tell me about the
I
podcast. Tell me about
started
your podcast.
story. I started Storyworthy in 2010, and at that time there was Adam Carolla, there was Mark Maron, there was Jackie Cation, and Jimmy Pardo. So there were about four other shows that I knew about, and I started Storyworthy because Adam Carolla had left terrestrial radio. Howard Stern had, of course, gone to satellite. Then Adam made his own podcast, and then I started thinking, hey, wait a minute, this is feasible, I could do this too. So I started doing it, and the idea would be that it's not long form interview, but you ask the guests what story they want to tell, and then they bring that story to the table. So it's not like where are you from and all that. It just talks about what they want to speak about. So that's the concept, and I've been very fortunate to have all sorts of wonderful guests. I've done over 850 shows now. And Steve, I've made hundreds of dollars. Hundreds.
But that's what people don't get. Like they see these big deals, they think all these podcasters, and it's funny because I mean, when you talk about that, I remember when I was looking for sponsors, and I used to get some sponsors for Cooper Talk. It was internet radio at the time, but I would sit there and I'd send like an energy drink company, and I go, hey, I'd love to have your as a sponsor. Go, okay, we'll send you some drinks. I go, well, I really don't drink caffeine. They go, no, that's how we'll pay you. I'm like, fuck you. I'd rather not have a sponsor than have you give drinks. So, and you've had big guests, but now you've gone through different inclinations because you did it with Hannes. I was on it with you with Hans Finney.
Yeah, I had a partner for 6 years, and now I've been doing it 9 years without him. And there's been all sorts of I've had 3 or 4 or 5 different networks. I've had 1 show a week, 2 shows a week. And that's just one show. So Storyworthy is one show. I did another podcast called Screwed Up Stories. And that was me and Rachel O'Brien. We were on the Westwood One platform, and we had a podcast for 1 year. Same idea that you brought this story to the table, but it was only women. So it was kind of like we've all screwed up. How did you screw up? So same sort of idea. There's nothing really original in this business.
You also had the music one for Spotify, I believe.
Yeah, I had a really great show. The show I'm most proud of is called My Life in 3 Songs, and that's still on Spotify on your phone. You can get it totally free if you have the Spotify app. It's called My Life in 3 Songs. I talk to comedians about the 3 songs in their life that have inspired them. So I really enjoy doing that. But as you know, music licensing is quite tricky, so I haven't been able to keep it up. I haven't been able to do any more new episodes. It's been 1 year because Spotify discontinued that program. It was a Spotify program. They owned it. And so you could use Spotify's music if you use their platform, Anchor. So that's what happened. And then they pulled it out and they said, no, you don't have that anymore. So I can't create new episodes, but the 53 I did are there. So go check them out. I got everybody, man. I've got the best comedians on there. Really quality show. I was so proud of myself, and continue to be, even though, I can't make new ones.
Well, okay. I got to ask you something. We're on LinkedIn, as I said, and all of a sudden, I don't see you recording episodes, and I wonder what happened. Then I see you posted you lost your hearing.
Yeah.
No, tell me about this, because as you know, I think of it. I talked to Chris Barron from the Spin Doctors, and he had lost his voice. And as a musician or as an interviewer, our hearing is so important. So what happened? I mean, because it's just not something like I've known you. I know you. We've talked, you had cancer when you were younger, when you were in the Foreign Legion, and you've gone through stuff like that. And I've had my health issues. But what happened? Where did this come from?
I was in the Peace Corps, but the Foreign Legion is funny. No, I didn't do anything. I was just sitting watching TV one night, and my right ear, the sound went, and it was gone. So I just went deaf in my right ear. It's called sudden hearing loss. And you suddenly lose your hearing. It can happen to anybody. That's it.
So what do you do?
Well,
so what do you do
a lot of people don't do anything. A lot of people just decide, okay, now I only have hearing in one ear for the rest of my life. but that is no bueno for me because I play a lot of music and I'm on stage. I need my hearing. I mean, I'm getting up there in years, but I figure I got another 30 years, So I need to hear like today. So this happened last May 29th, I think it was. And fast forward 6 months, I was able to get a cochlear implant on my ear. So it looks like this. So this is the round part there's a coil. This is the coil. And then this is the sound processor. This is the battery part. It's kind of simple when you really look at it. This is the battery. And this is the sound processors in here. So what happens is there's a teeny little hole right there. That's a microphone. And so we're able to trick our brain. I'm able to trick my brain by getting a cochlear implant. So you go to a doctor called an otolaryngologist, a surgeon, and it's an outpatient surgery, but you're in there about 7 hours. They basically cut a huge hole, they cut down the back of your ear and they open it up like a flap. And they insert a tiny electrode into the cochlea of your ear, which is like the cochlea of your ear, it looks like a seashell, the little seashell. And then they put a wire from the cochlea to your brain. Then it's attached, like I said, I have another one, I have two. It's attached via this magnet. And they insert a magnet in my head. There's a magnet in my head here under my hair. You can't see anything. It's, they put it under the skin. So the magnet hooks onto my head. And then this little hook goes around my ear. And the microphone is picking up everything, right? So we're faking it. We're tricking. Nobody hears from their ears anyway. We all hear from our brain. But we want it to sound like it's at least coming from that area. So I can now hear. It's not perfect, and it never is going to be perfect. But at least if you're sitting beside me in the car, I can hear you. So it's pretty astonishing.
The first time you went on stage after this, did you feel a difference? Were you a little bit off? Because, you've been doing storytelling forever. I remember we were in an I.O. storytelling show. I don't know if you remember this. It was on Hollywood Boulevard. It was me, you. I know Jay Mondian was in it. You told your dating game story.
Yeah.
I told either my Indian Viagra. I think I told my Indian Viagra story. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I remember that. So you were in the forefront of the storytelling, and I want to get the story smash in a little. But the first time you were on stage with the implant, did you feel a difference? Were you a little bit nervous? Because it's like for me, my eye, I'm blind. As I gotten older, my eyes gotten lazier. I don't worry about it on the stage anymore. I just tell the audience, okay, you know what? Yeah, I may be looking at it. But what was it like for you that first time?
I got the surgery on December 16th, I think it was December 16th. And then it was a whole nother month before I got activated. So when I went into the audiologist department and my audiologist, she kind of turned me on, right? So that all of a sudden I could start hearing this cochlear implant working. So it doesn't sound clear at first. It sounds like a lot of in the background because it's picking up the hair rustle, it's picking up wind, it's picking up anything. So it's not perfect. It takes up to a year actually for it to get clear. And so the first time on stage, it wasn't very dramatic. It wasn't dramatic because I wasn't hearing well. I was just hearing static on this side. So it wasn't like a revelation. All of a sudden I could hear. It's still not perfect, but it's getting better. And it's interesting. Now I do these remote checks with my, with a company, a robot. I don't know what it is, but on my phone, I have 2 different apps that hook up to my cochlear implant. And so it'll say, it's time for your remote check, Christine. And then I'll put an earplug in my good ear, as it were. And then in my remote check, they'll say things like, it'll be basically, tell me the numbers that you're hearing. So then you'll hear like 281 and you'll click in 281 and they'll say 529. You'll say 529. So it's testing, right? It's testing your hearing. Then, Steve, all of a sudden, it comes up on my machine. We are now shutting down your sound processor. And my whole head went like they could turn me off from wherever they are and whoever they are. And then it's like, we are powering your cochlear implant up again. And it's like,
that's crazy. You know, you think about technology. That's like when I had my heart issue, when I had the AFib, they put this little thing, it was like this big. I swear it was like this big. And I would stick it right here on my chest. And that was it.
Yeah,
It was just, and I would walk around and you could take a shower with it. Didn't make a difference. Because before in the past, you had to put this big halter thing on. It was like this thing hanging off.
Right.
This little thing. And they could tell. They're like, oh, yeah, by the way, you were in AFib 1% of the time. I'm like, how can you tell? Like, there was nothing. It was just that thing. Modern technology is amazing.
Yeah, so it's really neat. And I'm really glad I went forward and tried to get this. Because I know I only have Medi-Cal. So I don't have good insurance, and they turned me down when I first, tried to get it. They turned me down, and then I appealed it, and I said, look, I need to hear, and then they reversed it. And, they told me, at least at Medi-Cal, that they reverse 80% of appeals.
Well, there you go. So people, Christine Blackburn will tell you, if you're Medi-Cal, appeal. So stories. Let's go. You're doing both stand-up comedy and stories. Were you a storyteller first, or a stand-up comic first?
No, stand-up. I'm all about stand-up. I've been doing stand-up. Oh my goodness. The first time on stage was 1992. So crazy.
Now, were you in LA or were you still in Pittsburgh?
No, I was in Pittsburgh, where I'm from. And then I took like a 15-year break from comedy, but now I'm back and I'm doing a lot of comedy and I just love it. And my kid just graduated from high school, so they're going to college, and Mama's going on the road.
Now, how do you? Do you bring your stories into stand-up? Because I did a storytelling show a while ago, and I've noticed a lot of people don't understand the difference is, and you'll know because you do the story smash, and you do storytelling a lot and comedy. In comedy, we're so used to trying to get the laugh, but in stories, you don't have to get the laugh. Like I told the story and it was but you're sitting there and you want to reach for that laugh because you're used to it. But inside your head, you're going, well, no, I'm telling a story. Right. How do you go between the both? Because it's not like you do a story here and a comedy here. You're doing comedy, story. How do you differentiate the both?
I do a lot more comedy than storytelling, a lot more comedy. Comedy's a lot harder, obviously, a lot harder. You can make big mistakes in storytelling and still get out of it. But there is, of course, it's a different art form, and storytelling, there's something to it. I teach classes at Flappers and I teach people, you got to build the suspense. You got to draw it out. We need names. We need visuals. We need, paint the picture, tell us the names. And so it's just a different art form, but stand-up is much tougher. But I also think it's a much bigger challenge and it's a lot of fun. Stand-up, you really need a joke about every 20 seconds. And storytelling, of course, you don't. So my storytelling has gotten dramatically better because I'm doing so much comedy. Because now I add stuff into my storytelling I never added before because it just fits. It's funny, it's funny.
No, what made you, first of all, what made you get into stand-up? And then what made you get into storytelling? Because there's a lot of people who, Alex Stein does, I think that's his name. He does a lot of storytelling, but he doesn't really do stand-up, I don't think.
No,
I know he does that. So what made you get into stand-up first? And then what made you gravitate towards storytelling?
Yeah, most comedians come from some tragedy. I've always heard that. Have you heard that?
Yeah, but I don't always agree with it.
I do. I think it's.
I know a lot of well-adjusted. I know a lot of well-adjusted comedians.
No, of course, I'm totally well-adjusted too. No, I'm saying it comes from something. In other words, you don't become a comedian because you want to. You don't become a comedian because that's how you really want to do things. It's too hard, right? You do it because you really need that approval, and there's no other high like getting a laugh. So. In my opinion, it's very addictive. And it's also, it's wordplay. And I love reading. I love the English language. I love wordplay. So, for me, the first time on stage was I was only 25. My first husband, swear to God, had just got another girl pregnant, and we'd only been married like a year. And that's enough to really hit you hard that you get on stage. You know what I mean? I also had a lot of trouble in my childhood. My father left when I was only 15, but then my first husband left. So there was a pattern. Things weren't going well. So there's, usually some tragedy, at least for me, attached. And then you get on stage and you make fun of it. And the first joke I ever wrote, I still do on stage. And it says, my first husband got another girl pregnant while we were married, and I'm flexible, but I'm not that flexible. And I always get a laugh.
Well, it's because you're bearing your soul and it's right up front. So
That's what everybody
okay,
does,
so you're doing comedy. You're doing comedy in Pittsburgh. Now, what takes you out to LA? How do you? Because I talked to you ages ago. How did you end up in LA?
Well, I had been a flight attendant, and after 7 years, I stopped flying because it's boring and repetitive, and I was never going to be the pilot, Steve. It's a different job. So I quit, and I went to the Peace Corps in the United States Peace Corps, and I was sent to the Kingdom of Tonga, which is in the South Pacific. You know Tonga?
I've never been there, but I know of it.
A couple years ago during the Olympics, there was a Tongan man who had no shirt on and in his skirt, his Tovala skirt, and he made a big splash. Anyway, and then there was also a volcano recently that went off in Tonga. But anyway, I went down to Tonga to teach English as a second language, and I was sent to an outer island with only 67 people. So it was kind of rough. It was kind of crazy. And the Tongans, Steve, they taught me to use a washboard to wash my clothes. And I taught them that Americans cry a lot. Anyway, I was only down there less than 3 months, and I got sick. And I got medevaced out of Tonga because I had such a high fever. And they discovered when I got to Hawaii, that was the closest state, that I, in fact, had a tumor in my kidney. So I had got cancer out of the blue. And so I went back to Washington, D.C., where they did a surgery on me, a nephrectomy, and they took my right kidney out. And then I had to do chemotherapy. So they kind of kicked me out of the Peace Corps because I had to get CAT scans for a number of years after that. And, there's no electricity there. So that really dashed my Peace Corps hopes. And so then I went back to the airline, actually. For some crazy reason, I went back to the airline and asked for my job back. And they said no. They said no. Fuck. So it was like, well, I don't have a job. I can't be in the Peace Corps. What have I always wanted to be? Well, I want to be a comedian. So I packed up and came west to Los Angeles. It'll be 28 years in August. I love it here.
So then it's, it is a great place. And I know, and you've done well. So what was it like when you first arrived there? Because I know, eventually you were in a commercial. You played my friend Neil Boble's wife in a cable commercial, something like that. But what did you do when you first got there? Did you get an agent right away? Did you try to do stand-up?
No. I didn't have any. I didn't have any hair, so I couldn't get an agent because I was just getting my hair back. But I started doing stand-up, a lot of stand-up. And I started hosting a gig in Glendale called the Stage Left Coffee House, and waiting for my hair to grow. And then, but with stand-up, you didn't need hair. So I didn't have to worry, so I did stand-up pretty heavy in 97, 98, 99, 2000. And then I started getting more commercial work and doing commercials. And, I got an agent from being on stage doing stand-up. This woman asked me after the show if I had a commercial agent. And I said, no, I don't. And she said, well, you have one now. And she gave me her card and I signed with her. And then I did do a lot of commercials, but a lot of auditions too. You know, it's probably like you go out 40 times, you leave your apartment with hair and makeup and everything else, and you drive, traffic, whatever. You do an audition, come home, never hear another word. You know what I mean? So you could do that 80 times for every audition you book. So it's a really hard thing. But then I booked a job in 2004 on Ready for the Weekend movie. It was an interstitial. And so, meaning that me and my partner would go around the country and we would do interstitials in between the movie. They would show like an Adam Sandler movie or something. It's kind of like dinner and a movie, but this was called Ready for the Weekend. We would tell people what to do that weekend. Anyway, so that was a great job, and I had that for 2 years. That was such a wonderful job.
No, so wait, you would go into the movie theater? What would happen? Explain
No,
this.
we would be like, hey, you guys, welcome to Ready for the Weekend Movies. Dan and Christine, we're hanging out in Boston today because we're showing the film Independence Day. And what better city to be in than Boston? And we would do 9 segments in each city. And so, you know, there were producers plan out the day. We'd get to go to nice restaurants. And it was fun, super fun. But it'd be like, here's a weekend idea. Why don't you make a tree out of a pistachio nut? Like some really stupid ideas. But it was really fun, and I made money. It was great.
No, what do you remember your first commercial?
The first commercial I did was in Pittsburgh for Wix Furniture. Wix Furniture. But I've done now
LA? How about
in LA? I'm going to say. It was for, you know what it was for? It was for like a company called, it wasn't Nokia, but it was like Nokia. It was a Japanese company, and it was like for a cell phone, but it was not a cell phone. It was more like a brick with numbers, you know, like it was totally a joke. That was my first commercial. And they wanted me to have an English accent. It was only showing in Japan. And they wanted me to have an English accent, and I was terrible. So funny.
I always do the stupid Cockney accent for Joanne, and she always tells me to get out.
Yeah.
I go, it's awful. I mean it to be awful. Now,
how's Joanne doing? Good.
She's doing great. She's watching TV in the other room. She always goes in the other room when I do my shows. Now,
Sure.
Tell the viewers what keeps you on track. You just said something that you would get 40 auditions. I always tell people in the business world, actors have get the most rejection than anybody, hands down. You might go for 10 deals, you might get one. What kept you going? 40 auditions. You know, I'm sure sometimes you went more. Like Chip Chinnery did like 100 auditions and never got anything. Now,
Yeah.
finally, he started popping. But what kept you in the game? Because you must come home, and there's days that you probably said, I fucking nailed that. That should be mine.
Oh,
What kept you in the game?
always. You always thought you got it, and you never did. It's just abuse, you know, self-abuse, I guess. You know, you're just dying for that one. And I could do it well. I played a casual mom, pretty but average. So I didn't ever want to look real good, just sort of good. And I just got really good at it as like the mom, young mom. I really nailed it. So I just booked a whole lot. And it's just what I wanted to do. I really like being in front of the camera, and I was good at it. And at that time, you know, it was a real, and it still would be. It's an honor to get an audition, you know, because they're not calling everybody. You know what I mean? They're calling about 60 actresses for about 800 people who want it. You know what I mean? And they're calling in 60, and then they're going to call back in 12 for a callback, and then one person's going to get it. So it's very competitive. You always wanted to walk into a room where everybody looks like you, because at least that way you know that the producers are in the ballpark. They at least want a blonde, or they at least want somebody that looks like you. Because if you walk into an audition and people are all different races and all different ages, that means they don't know what they want. And the odds are you're not going to get it.
Let me tell you something. You know, at least you walked in knowing they want a pretty young mom. Okay. I booked the part on a Calvin Harris video. I don't know if I told the story on the show. And I go in and my agent calls me and says, the part is for a creepy guy. Okay. So I go
That's
creepy
you.
guy. And she goes, at least it's not creepier guy. All right, so I go to the audition, and these were the fucking creepiest people. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting there going, "You have an image, like, oh yeah, you know what? I know I have a lazy eye, but I'm pretty good looking." And you see some guy that looks like freaking Ron Jeremy, and some guy with like big ears. And
Hilarious.
I was like, "That's the thing." But when you go in the room, you're right. When you go in the room, though, you look around, you get the feel for it. And I walked out going, "Holy shit, I'm a creepy guy." And to make it worse, I got the part. So I guess that's something I don't know.
That's awesome. That's a good story.
So now tell me about story, how you got into story, story where, how'd you get the whole story thing, and how has it evolved to Story Smash, where the wonderful Blaine Capatch is always your judge. And I've known Blaine since
Yeah.
the Comedy
Yeah.
Factory out of the days back in '88. But
Oh,
I mean, Wendi from the Goldbergs, Danny Zucker from Modern
plays
Family.
a lot.
But how did
Yeah.
this all evolve? How did you start getting into the stories? Because it wasn't when you
Well,
started, when we did that show years ago, there wasn't a lot of storytelling.
no, right. Well, the Moth was a big inspiration. Are you familiar with the Moth?
I've heard of it, I know of it. I'm not real familiar with it.
Well, the Moth storytelling started in 1997 and started from a guy in New York City, but he's actually from Savannah, Georgia. Nice guy. I've only met him once. First name George, I can't remember. But anyway, he started having these moths. And so they'd be all over New York City, and then they started expanding all over the country. So I would go to the Moth a lot here in Los Angeles. So you could go to the Moth, and you might know a topic that night. That, let's say the topic is anxiety. Well, then you're going to need to come up with a 5-minute story about anxiety. And when you get there, you'll put your name in the hat, and they're going to pick 10 storytellers one at a time to tell their story about anxiety, 5 minutes. And then they've got judges there that they just make up the judges. Whoever is sitting there can be a judge. Like, they'll be like, okay, you guys are judges, you guys are judges, you guys are judges. And then one at a time, they'll call up the person, will go on stage, do their 5 minutes, and then they'll get a score between 1 and 10 from each of the judges. They do all 10 storytellers. Whoever's the winner wins that slam. It's called a Moth Slam. Then they go on to the bigger competition, which is after 10 slams, they do a grand slam. So anyway, there's a whole thing. They still do it, still goes on all the time. There's 3 every month in Los Angeles, but you have to have a story about anxiety ready to go. You have to be able to pay the $17 to get into the Moth. I had a kid at the time, so you have to like pay a babysitter to take care of your kid. Then you sit there and you may never be called. You may never get called. Well, anyway, so it's hard. And when I would go and watch the Moth, and I did do it many times, I won 3 times, but I would sit there and I would listen to all these stories on stage. And after they would be done with their story, I would be like, and then what? I'd be following people to the car saying, and then what? Because I was so curious. But the Moth is really tight on their time. Anyway, so all of that Moth experience was put together with Adam Carolla showing me anyway that it was accessible to do podcasting. You know what I mean? When I saw what he was doing, I thought, wait a minute, anybody can do this. So it was kind of a mixture. I was inspired by Adam, but also inspired by the Moth. And then I put them together and started Storyworthy. And like you said, I had a co-host for a little while. And within a year, 2011, I started a game show, same concept, storytelling. This one's called Story Smash. And Story Smash is super fun because I got a prize wheel. I wanted this wheel, Steve. So it was $680. And I didn't have $680. So I sold my gold jewelry. I had a child, a 4-year-old child. I couldn't just go buy a prize wheel. So I sold all my gold jewelry, got the money, bought a prize wheel from a guy at Riverside Promo Wheels. And this big wheel comes and so now I started this game show. People come on stage, they spin this wheel, whatever it lands on, they tell a true 1-minute story. And in the second round, it's 2 minutes. And then the third round is 3 minutes. So it's really tight, funny storytelling. And then I have expert judges critique the story. And that's kind of where it gets really funny. And one of my
Now,
tags is
real quick, I want to interrupt.
story.
I want to interrupt real quick. When you got this wheel, where did you start pitching? Like, how did you pitch? Because this story, in a land of all these stand-up shows, you're someone coming saying, I want to bring a big $650 wheel in, and I want to do this. How did you pitch the show, and where was your first place you did it?
I did the first one was at El Cid. I did a couple at El Cid on Sunset, which was great. Really nice gig. Beautiful restaurant. Really fun. And I had to buy a clock. It's kind of like one of those clocks you might see, a countdown clock. You might see it in the post office. And the countdown clock, Steve, was $88. And I had to sell my breast pump for that. So the point is,
you're out of your gold, you're out of your breast pump. You're hurting right now.
I know. And I'm in my 40s driving around LA with a prize wheel in my Subaru. You know what I mean? It's crazy. But what's the difference, Because like you said earlier, I survived cancer. It's all gravy. You know what I mean, Steve? It's all gravy. Doesn't matter. Have fun.
So you go from El Cid. Where do you take it after El Cid?
I did it at a place called Fado Do. Do you ever hear of that? Fado Do, Club Fado Do. It's off Fairfax, actually, in kind of mid-city, a little further south. And then I did it at the Improv for like 6 years. From 2017 to 20, and then the pandemic hit. And then we came back in 21 to the Improv for another year. And then we moved it, and now it's at the Lyric Hyperion, which is perfect because it's only like a mile from where I live.
Now, what did you do during the pandemic? You still did it, right? Did you do it?
Yeah, I did. I did a version of it on YouTube. It was hilarious. So funny. I'm in my apartment trying to make up this whole flipping game on StreamYard. And my boyfriend was helping me and my kid was there. It was just so silly. Because, what else are you going to do? You're in a pandemic.
Now, first of all, how did you get your judges? Tell me some of that. You've had some great, I think, our friend Wendi Liebman, has she been a judge?
Yeah, Wendi Liebman's been a judge. But it's so funny, Steve? She judged about 4 times. And then I asked her, this is like 10 years ago. And finally she wrote to me and she goes, Christine, I don't like being a judge. I said, right on. And she said, I'm sorry, I'm going to turn you down. I said, no problem. That's kind of funny.
So now, how did you get these judges? Like, how did you cultivate these relationships? Because you got some heavy hitters.
Yeah, I've had a lot of great people.
So tell some of the judges you've had and your.
I've had Larry King. Larry King was on my show as a judge.
How'd you get Larry King? I don't know because he was on your. No, he was a judge. Larry King was a judge at your show.
Yeah.
How'd you get Larry King? How did that happen?
I love Larry King. I always was a big fan of his. I just think he was a wonderful interviewer. So naturally curious. Did you like him too, Steve?
Yeah, I thought he was great.
I love Larry. Yeah. So I just got to know his publicist. I reached out, got to know the publicist, and I just asked. I'd also, now that I think of it, he'd also done a Storyworthy for me. He did Storyworthy twice for me. And I got to go to his home and everything. And, he knew I was a nice person and I would deliver the goods and I'm not going to waste his time. I think it's just the way, show business works. If you have a good track record, Storyworthy, the podcast, I've had hundreds, almost 1,000 people on that show. So, people want to be on shows. Like I want to be on your show, people want to come on. So, I've had some great people for sure.
Tell some more of the judges because it's an impressive list.
I've had on Phil Rosenthal. He was a judge. And I've had, Blaine Capatch, of course, Greg Proops, Danny Zucker, Spike Ferenston, Peter Melman. Those are all Seinfeld writers. A lot of Simpsons guys, Dana Gould, and, just a lot of these guys. And now I've been having on Sandra Singh Low. She's a very accomplished writer, author, performer, playwright. And if I go to the website, storysmashshow.com, It'll pull up so fast, all of these fabulous judges. I'm going to do that right now so I can tell you some names. I've had on Kathy Ladman and Marilyn Rice-Cub and Jimmy Pardo and Wayne Fetterman and Kevin Nealon. Some really neat people. Stephanie Courtney, Bruce Baum, Dan O'Shannon. Just really smart people.
Damn.
I feel really
You
lucky
got some good. You got
to have met so many interesting talents. There's plenty of room for talent. Steve, if somebody is undeniably funny, then they have a space at the table.
now the show now though, you have people are booked before, right? Because I see your flyer. Do you book 3 people and then have a mystery guest, or how does it work?
I book 3 people and then we call one name from the audience. One name from the audience.
How do you get these people? But how do you get your 3 people? Because
everybody wants to be on my show. Steve, I got a hit, man. I got a hit show. Everybody wants to be on. I have a list of 30 people who want to be on my show because it's so much fun and people are laughing and laughing and laughing. I mean, it's just silly. And also, again, it's a fast, tight show. You get there at 7:15, you will be out the door by 9 o'clock. I run a tight ship and it's always funny, and I don't make anybody bring anybody. So it makes it really a nice spot for comedians. They're all comedians.
So now back to your stand-up. What does your act concentrate on now? I mean, and I always think, is it more, I always say for me, the stuff I do now is completely different. I might do a joke. I know, like you said, you start with that joke you've done and then it works and you're used to it. And it's something that you always know it will work. My favorite joke that would always work in LA was, I would say, I just got back from Armenia and there's a lot of people from Glendale over there, but I can't do that here because it dies. It doesn't work because no one knows what I'm talking about. But that was something I would depend on. It's one of those things. But now, how has your act developed and your writing process developed over the years?
You're so sweet to ask, Steve. That's so nice of you. Well, for a long time, I just worked on the big chunks of who I am, like I'm from Pittsburgh, youngest of 6, so it started off with like the basics. So I have like my family chunk, and then I have a chunk about my daughter, my child, and then I have a chunk about how much luckier she is to grow up in Los Angeles than I was growing up in Pittsburgh. I mean, massive differences. My kid went to Disneyland like 25 times, no sweat. They just go to Disneyland all the time. When I was growing up in Pittsburgh, once a year, my family took us east to Gettysburg. We vacationed on a battlefield, Steve. Come on, kids, let's get a slave burger and a Lincoln lemonade. It was very different. Very different. Anyway, so then I was a flight attendant, so I have a big chunk on flying, and then I have a big chunk on Peace Corps. And recently I've been doing more like one-off jokes, like about the Olympics. The Olympics are coming to LA, so I'm very excited about that. They have they've got some new games. I don't know if you heard, but there's some new games out here in LA. Some of the games we saw coming. Some of these events, like the car races on the 405, we saw that coming, right, Steve? The competitive.
They need the slow speed chase. And that's the one thing I do miss about LA. I miss turning on like Channel 5 or KCAL, and you'd always see that chase. But the drivers were so polite. Like I remember watching when the guy would stop at every stop sign not to get extra tickets. But I miss that because are they still? Does that happen all the time still out there, or is that
not all the time?
Is it just
not all the time? I would say like I see like maybe 6 or 7 a year, not like before. But it is a lot of fun, and there's I mean, it could be dangerous, of course, but there was a bar down the street called the Rustic Inn that would serve dollar drafts during the car chase because there's a TV up. When the chase is over, drafts are back to $7. But that was fun. Anyway, here in LA, the Olympics are coming. Like I said, there's some games we knew were going to come. Like there's a new event called competitive parking at Trader Joe's. Have you seen that?
Then there's also going to be funny things. That is so true, though, and that's funny because that's a great bit because I would hate the fucking Burbank Trader Joe's, you would go and I always say you end up parking in Glendale. I mean, you know how it is. It's just, and people don't get it. Like here, I just pull into my Trader Joe's. There, it was hell. And people don't understand that only in LA.
It's fun though. It's fun. There's
So,
also going to be a new event called the Fentanyl 500. Have you heard of that?
no, but in Philadelphia, don't do that joke here.
The athletes will do fentanyl, and we'll see how fast it takes them to get to 500 feet. That's bad. That's bad.
That's all right though. So
Okay,
now,
but what
how
about
often do you?
what about the
Okay.
broad jump? That's going to be new as well. The broad jump. This is not like the long jump of the 70s and 80s. This is when athletes, contestants will come to Hollywood. They'll find a broad and they'll jump her.
Well, there you go. So now, are you
The
doing this? Are
scoring
you
is
trying
going to
this
be
out now?
The scoring is based on speed, style, and the star power of the broad. Steve.
There you go. Now, are you trying these on stage now? Are you working them out on stage now, getting
Yeah,
ready for
that's
the
what.
Olympics?
Yes, I'm doing that now. Yes.
So now, how often do you write? I mean, are you constantly writing, or do you just and like for me, stuff pops in my head. And
I
I'll
go
write it
out.
down.
I
I
write
can't
every
sit
day.
down and write.
Every
Do you
day I
sit down
can.
and make a conscious effort to write, or do you just
Not
it pops in your
necessarily.
head?
Sometimes I do, but more so I think of something and I jot it down, or I make a note into my, voice memo on my phone. So I don't sit down and write like for 2 hours like some people do. I don't do that.
Now, when you say you're going to be going on the road, where are some where do comics perform these days in LA? Because when you go, and I know like on the road, I know people will go to Santa Barbara, or you go to
Yeah,
the
I go to
Sand
Santa
Trap,
Barbara
Johnny
a lot.
Cardinal's. Do you ever go to the Sand Trap? I think it's Johnny Cardinal's room.
Yeah, I love the Sand Trap in Beaumont.
It's a great room.
Yeah, because
So,
all those people love Johnny, and he just gives it 1 hour. So that's nice. So everybody knows it's just for 1 hour. They're going to turn off the TVs and they're going to do stand up. Super fun. And everybody there is always in good spirits. But there's a lot of different places to perform. I played a room down in Temecula. It gets very conservative, though, as you know, out of LA. So you got to be careful about your material because, when you get out into the rural areas, you're in Trump country once again. So it's a fine line.
I played the VFW a few weeks ago, and I didn't know how they'd like me, and they really liked me, and it was funny.
That's great.
It's just I think though comedy, if you're a smart comic, you know how to work the room, and you've been doing it for a long time.
In other words, you can't just dump on Trump. I mean, we want to, but there's no point. It's sad anyway. It's not funny.
So are you still acting? Are you still into that part, or are you just concentrating on the story smash and the
I'm
stand-up?
concentrating on Story Smash, and also I do storytelling over at Flappers Comedy Club. So I teach storytelling, and then we do shows in the main room, which is really fun. And then this fall, Steve, I'm doing a play in New York City. I'm producing a play in New York off Broadway. So I'm very excited.
Can you tell me about the play? Are you allowed to talk about it?
It's called The Pitch. And we've already performed the show 3 times. We produced it 3 times in LA. It was written by a guy named Tom Alper, and he actually plays the lead in the play. There's 10 characters in the play. It's a really big cast, and it takes place in a boiler room, very much like Glengarry Glen Ross, very much like that. They're selling electronic components. And then on the side, there's also a daughter-father story that's kind of sweet. So it's a boiler room play with a father-daughter subplot. And since we've already done the show 3 times, and each time in a bigger theater, it's a hit. It is a great show. It's called The Pitch. We're doing it at the Actors Temple this fall on 47th Street. So it's going to be very exciting. So that is my full concentration for the next 6 months.
Now, how'd you get involved with that? I mean, are you in it also, or are you just producing? What's the story?
I'm not in it. I may play the understudy for one role, but it's mostly 8 men in this play anyway. And so I wouldn't have a role for me anyway. But no, my boyfriend is the playwright and the lead of the play. And I'm just a very helpful producer.
So how long are you going to be in New York for?
We're going to be there for 2 months, and we're doing 6 weeks, 5 shows a week, 30 performances. And I will be the house manager, and I will be selling concessions and candy and hats and helping out at the rehearsals. So it's really taking me in a different direction, but I'm doing it primarily because I believe in this project. That's the main reason. But also, I want to be in New York. I need to do more stand up in New York. So I'm going to be doing as much stand up as I can, trying to really hone in my 1 hour special. I'm going to do a 1 hour special next year in 2026. That's the goal. That's the goal.
That's good. You set the goal. Well, that's
Yeah.
the goal. Now, what's going to happen with Story Smash? Why aren't we seeing that on TV? What's up with that? There's a lot of crap
I know,
on TV.
right?
You know, midnight's done. You know, Taylor Tomlinson wants to concentrate on stand up, so that show's over.
Why did they stop at midnight?
She wants to concentrate on stand up, so she doesn't want to host it anymore. So they're scrapping it. That's what you should get your agent to pitch Story Smash, because people need a show like that. Why? What's going on with that? Why aren't you getting that on TV?
Well, it's not as easy as you think, obviously. Yeah, maybe we'll do that. It's just not as easy as you think. And the show is pretty it's not like a regular game show. It is adult oriented. You know, they're criticizing people in a funny way. It's not mean, but it's in a funny way. So it's definitely a Comedy Central sort of show, maybe Netflix even, but it's just not as easy as you think. And I got to get a pilot together. And the pilot's going to cost money. And that's the next project after this play. That's another project I want to do. And Story Smash, everybody that comes says that. Everybody that sees Story Smash says, why isn't this on TV? And it's just, you know, unfortunately, in the climate we live in, the best music isn't on the radio. The best shows aren't on television, and the best comedians don't have specials. That's not the way it works. You know, it's really nuanced. So just because you want something doesn't mean you're getting it. Unless maybe you know Reba McEntire and she'll host it for you. Or maybe you know Jane Lynch. I mean, she's attached to people. So they want somebody with a following. Nobody knows who Christine Blackburn is. So it's a double-edged sword. Ah, you're the sweetest.
I know. So
but I have hope. I have hope because I think the world needs a lot more comedy right now. And of course I want money, but more so I do my projects out of passion. And if I am working on a project, I'm going to give it everything I have. And if that ain't good enough, well, I guess I'm not the one, you know? I can only do what I can do. So I put a lot of pressure on myself, but I also realize I do what I can.
Exactly. Well, I always ask my guests this question to wrap it up. Looking back, you know, you've got a very interesting life. I mean, you think about it. We talk about, you know, people come out. I used to always talk to actors and they'd be like, oh, I had 3 pilots and none got picked up. I'm a failure. I'm like, no, dude, you had 3 pilots. Like, people don't even get that. But, you know, you've been on TV, you've been on commercials, you've beaten cancer, the hearing thing, you Story Smash. You raised a great daughter. I remember your daughter when she was younger. I remember, you know, when you would talk about her you always say things she would say to you on Facebook.
Yes.
And now looking back, what are personal and professional? What are a few things that make you really proud? When you look back, what makes you proud?
You're so nice. Thanks, Steve. I mean, I'm proud that I hung in there with Storyworthy and have done so many episodes, and I didn't just quit, because it's really easy to quit. Anybody can quit. And I don't even do weekly shows anymore, but I still do about 15 shows a year. So I'm still doing it. Again, it's not for money. It's because I want to do art. And, you know, all of this stuff, it's always changing. So I'm proud of Storyworthy, and I'm proud of Story Smash, because I'm telling you, this game show is so silly. People really, really enjoy it. So I'm proud of that as well. And I'm proud that I have skirted a full-time job. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've been able to not have that full-time job that's enabled me to really be there for my kid when they get home from school and to take them to school and all that. Because now my kid's going to college and my work is done here, Steve. It's over, you know? It's over. They're out. So I'm just really happy that I took those moments. I didn't put them in daycare. I didn't give them babysitters. I really raised my kid well. Thank you. I'm proud of that.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, good. You have a lot to be proud of. Now, how can people get in touch with you? How can people find all your info? How can they find about all your projects?
I have 4 websites going. It's so crazy, but you can access all of them via ChristineBlackburn.com.
Okay. So
Because I've got one for Story Smash, one for Story Worthy, one for My Life in 3 Songs, and then my personal one. And now one for The Pitch offbroadway.com. So now I have 5 websites.
So people, and if you Google Steve Cooper Storyworthy, I think you can find one of my past episodes. You can find one of them. And I don't know. I told a story about a car accident I have, and I told a story about Indian Viagra. But you can find them. So people definitely go look up Christine. You can go to Comedy Train Rek on YouTube. You can find all past episodes of Coop's Comedy Corner. If you go to coopertalk.net, I have 1,040 episodes of that. I recently had Stan Lynch, the drummer from Tom Petty. I really haven't recorded a lot lately. Now that I was substitute teaching and helping the kids out, now that that's done, I'm going to really kick back into gear and start recording more episodes of that. Also, if you go on YouTube, you can look up the Coop Tank. That's my business YouTube show. I moderate 3 business professionals from the South Jersey area,
awesome.
Philly area. We talk a lot of insight about dreams and passion and all that. So check that out. And as I said, go to Coop's Comedy Corner to get all that Coop swag. We got t-shirts, we got doggy shirts, we got. And Jimmy Corhan did a great job. I sat there and we talked about. He loves my old Cooper Talk logo. I'm not a big fan, and definitely follow, as I said, Comedy Train Rek. Jimmy Corhan kicks ass. He's the best producer around. So thank you for watching. Look up Christine Blackburn. Keep watching my show and keep watching the shorts. Go to Comedy Train Rek. There's some great shorts, some short stories that they have great clips. Anyway, I want to thank you, people, and I'll talk to you next week. Have a good day.
Bye.
Coop's Comedy Corner.